Hey there, friend. Welcome back to our cozy corner of the internet. Today's story is a gentle, heartwarming road trip through an alternate reality filled with peaceful landscapes, friendly folks, and quiet wonder. Whether you're here for a bedtime tale or just a moment of calm, this one's for all ages. So grab a blanket, get comfy, and let's begin. It all started in a sleepy little town called Thistlebend. The streets were lined with oak trees, their branches arching overhead like old friends leaning in for a hug. The houses were small and cheerful, each with a porch swing or a basket of fresh flowers by the door. Birds fluttered from fence to fence, and the scent of baked apples often drifted through the air, thanks to the pie shop at the corner. Our main character was Nora, quiet, curious, and a lover of maps. She lived in a tiny cottage with green shutters and ivy crawling up the walls. Her favorite possession was a rusted old car named Marigold. Marigold had been with her through every errand and every early morning picnic by the river. One sunny afternoon, as she was cleaning out the glove box for the first time in years, Nora found something strange. It was a folded map. Not just any map. This one shimmered slightly in the sunlight, as if it were printed on silk. Instead of roads and gas stations, it marked things like the lavender meadow that sings and the bridge that remembers your dreams. Nora blinked. There was a note tucked inside, only visible to those in need of a new perspective. She looked around her empty cottage, then back at the map. Her fingers tingled as she traced a route that seemed to loop right out of town into a forest that didn't exist on any map she'd seen before. She looked at Marigold, parked under the shade tree out front. The car almost seemed to be waiting. Without overthinking it, Nora packed a small basket, a thermos of rose tea, a couple of berry muffins, a sweater, and a notebook, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine gave a cheerful hum, and the breeze lifted the edge of the map like it was ready to guide her. As she turned onto the road, the familiar town slowly slipped behind her. The trees grew taller, greener, more alive. It was still the world she knew, but softer somehow. The air smelled of lemon balm, and something unplaceable like memory. Nora didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel lost at all. The road curled like a ribbon through golden fields. Tall grasses swayed in the breeze, brushing against the windows of Marigold as Nora drove slowly, her heart beating quietly with wonder. The further she went, the less familiar the world became, not in a frightening way, but in a soft, dreamlike way, like turning the pages of a forgotten fairy tale. Soon, she came upon a hand-painted wooden sign. "Welcome to Juniper Hollow, formerly Maplefield, formerly Sweet Fern. We change names when the old ones get too dusty." Nora chuckled. The town was nestled between two gentle hills, with cobblestone streets and mismatched houses that looked like they'd been built by storytellers, not architects. One cottage was shaped like a teapot, another had stained glass windows depicting animals in hats. Cats dozed in sunbeams, and someone had strung colorful paper lanterns from tree to tree. Nora parked under a linden tree and stepped out. The air was filled with the scent of lavender scones. A woman with silver hair and round glasses waved from a rocking chair. "You're new," she said, as if commenting on the weather. "Yes," Nora replied. "I followed a map." "Of course you did." The woman nodded, as if that explained everything. "You're right on time." Right on time for what? Nora didn't know, but she didn't feel the need to ask. That was the kind of town Juniper Hollow was. Questions answered themselves if you stayed long enough. She wandered into the town square, where a tiny library stood. Inside, the shelves were filled not with titles, but with emotions. Books to read when you miss someone, stories that smell like rain, and tales for brave days. Nora chose a slim volume from the shelf labeled Gentle Reminders, and sat on a bench beneath a flowering cherry tree. A girl with freckles and a sunflower-colored scarf skipped over. "Are you the one with the car that hums like a cat?" Nora blinked. "I guess I am." "I'm Liddy," the girl said. "Want to see the place where the wind tells stories?" "Yes," Nora smiled. "I really do." Liddy led her down a mossy trail to a cliff where the wind whistled through a row of hollow stones. When it blew just right, the tones became words not loud, but enough. Nora closed her eyes and listened. The wind whispered old memories she didn't know she'd forgotten. Her mother brushing her hair. The feeling of standing in the ocean for the first time. A laugh from someone she hadn't heard in years. She didn't cry, not quite, but her chest felt warm and full and ready. Liddy grinned. It's a good place to remember yourself. Nora stayed in Juniper Hollow until sunset, when the lanterns flickered on and the fireflies blinked along the garden paths. Before leaving, the woman in the rocking chair handed her a jam jar glowing with soft light. For your glove box, she said with a wink. Every traveler should have a bit of home. As Nora drove away, the town behind her shimmered and softened, like fog melting in the sun. The road opened again, and the map in the seat beside her fluttered with a new line drawn in gold. Nora followed the gold-threaded road as it wound through meadows of mint and wild rose. The sky turned soft with the blush of evening, and Marigold's headlights glowed gently, like lanterns guiding her toward something old and kind. The road narrowed into a path, and soon she found herself in a quiet grove. Trees with wide, dappled leaves rustled softly, as though whispering their welcome. Ahead, a small log cabin stood beside a slow-moving stream. A wooden sign hung above the door. The memory cabin, open when needed. Nora parked, the car engine sighing to a stop. She stepped out into the hush of the forest, crickets humming a lullaby in the distance. The cabin looked untouched by time ivy curling gently up its walls, a rocking chair swaying ever so slightly on the porch. When she stepped inside, she found no one there. But the room was warm, glowing with soft lamplight. A kettle on the stove began to whistle just as she closed the door behind her. A steaming mug of tea already waited on a table, beside a quilted chair and a softly crackling fireplace. It felt like the cabin had been expecting her. Books lined the shelves. A pie cooled on the windowsill. Everything felt familiar, not in a way that suggested she'd been there before, but in a way that made her believe it had been waiting for her, just in case. On the far wall hung a mirror, oval and framed with carved flowers, but when Nora looked into it, she didn't see her reflection. Instead, she saw her childhood bedroom, the yellow curtains, the books on the shelf, the tiny hand-painted lamp. Then, a memory flickered in the mirror. Her mother reading aloud as a thunderstorm rolled outside. Nora, small and safe under the covers, holding a stuffed bear with a missing eye. Tears welled in Nora's eyes, not from sadness, but from the gentleness of it all. A feeling she'd forgotten wrapped around her like the old quilt on the chair. She sat down, took a sip of the tea, and let herself remember. All the moments that had shaped her, all the people who had loved her in quiet ways, the laughter, the silences, the peaceful mornings with no plans at all. Eventually, the mirror dimmed, the fire popped softly. On a table near the door sat a fresh map. This one showed only a single line, leading back to Thistlebend. Nora picked it up and smiled. When she stepped outside, the jar of light from Juniper Hollow glowed a little brighter in her pocket. She slid into Marigold's seat, the cabin already fading into the trees behind her like it had never been there at all. But something inside her had changed. As the car rolled forward, the stars shimmered overhead. The wind felt familiar now, like a companion. She wasn't running away or chasing anything anymore. She was simply returning. Morning light spilled across the road like golden syrup as Nora drove back into Thistlebend. The oak trees arched just the same, and the houses still wore their cheerful shutters and flower boxes. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh-cut grass, but everything looked different. Not because the town had changed, but because Nora had. She slowed as she passed the pie shop. Mrs. Lark, the baker, waved from the window with flour on her cheek. Nora waved back and smiled. Really smiled. She had passed this same spot 1,000 times. But today, she noticed the way the light danced on the glass, the way the pie tins caught the sun. Every detail felt like a quiet miracle. She parked Marigold in her usual spot under the old shade tree. As the engine hushed, the stillness wrapped around her like a soft shawl. She held the glowing jar in her hands for a long moment, watching the tiny light swirl gently inside. Then she tucked it into her coat pocket and stepped out. Her cottage welcomed her like an old friend. The ivy on the wall had grown a little. The porch creaked in the same spots. The little brass bell above the door gave its usual jingle. But when she stepped inside, the silence felt different. Not empty, but peaceful. She placed the map on her kitchen table and sat beside it, running her fingers over the shimmering roads and golden paths. The alternate world she'd visited felt both impossibly far and forever near. She looked around her home. The books she loved were still there. Her mug with the tiny chip. The worn, cozy blanket draped over her favorite chair. She didn't need to change everything. She just needed to notice again. Later, she sat on her porch with a basket of warm muffins. A curious bird perched on the railing. A breeze rustled the leaves above. The day was quiet, but full like the cabin, like Juniper Hollow, like the map. Liddy's voice echoed softly in her memory. It's a good place to remember yourself. Nora looked out at her little street, glowing in the morning sun. Yes, she thought. That's exactly what this is. From then on, she kept the glowing jar on her bedside table, and the map tucked safely in the drawer. She didn't need to use it again, not yet. But knowing it was there, knowing there was a world of soft wonders and gentle surprises just beyond the veil of the everyday, that was enough. Because sometimes, the most magical road trip isn't about where you go. It's about how you return. And Nora had returned with her heart wide open. Thank you for joining us on this gentle journey through alternate roads and soft, glowing memories. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back soon for more cozy adventures. Until next time, keep your heart open and your map close. Hee.